Gospel according to Mark, the 10th chapter. Some Pharisees came, and to test Jesus, they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Then, in the house, the disciples asked him again about this matter. He said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me, do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. The Gospel of the Lord. Divorce. Family life and family values remain hot-button issues as much today as in Jesus' day. We find ourselves in a similar situation to those folks. On the one hand, we know that divorce is not what God intended for people. It flies in the face of the way God created our world to be in community. On the other hand, divorce is encoded into our laws, just as it was in the laws of the Pharisees. I know, maybe we should rename this Sunday, the first Sunday in October, as Divorce Sunday. Think Congress would go for that? Think of the political mileage to be gained with such an emphatic focus on family values. Well, granted, it's a negative focus, but what the heck? It seems that's the way everything is done in Congress these days. Or how about asking our churches' liturgical scholars to rearrange the liturgical calendar a bit and rename the 19th Sunday after Pentecost Divorce Sunday? You know, like we did with Super Bowl Sunday. After all, it's really what everyone's thinking about in church on that day anyway, so let's bring all this ancient stuff a little more up to date. Some Pharisees came, and to test him they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" We're tracking right with the Pharisees when they asked about divorce from a legal standpoint. In conversations about couples who are divorcing, one of the main topics is when the divorce is final. The day the judge slams her gavel and signs that all-important, we think, decree. The day before that, the couple was still married. That day, they're no longer married. Voila! We put our very existence into the hands of the law. The law. Jesus said that it's for our hardness of hearts that the law exists. Certainly, people struggle with the question of whether to divorce. It is hardly ever taken lightly. We turn ourselves over to the law, divorce, when we bump up against our inability to live in community, marriage, God created for us. We fool ourselves into thinking that the law provides solutions. For instance, we think war is a solution, particularly as we lead ourselves down the primrose path of shock and awe, that the war will be started and concluded in a short period of time, all stop, no problem. We delude ourselves into thinking that divorce is a solution. But in fact, it rarely is. People who get divorced to get away sometimes get married a second time, often thinking, I've been down this road once already, now I know where the potholes are. Now I know how to do it right. Only to surprise themselves by discovering that their second spouse has most or all of the same faults and habits as their first spouse did. And it's kind of funny, but I'm really not kidding. Or they themselves repeat their own problematic behavior. This isn't always the case, of course, but it happens frequently enough to be remarkable. Have you ever spoken to someone with a story like that? I know I have. What if divorce isn't really divorce? Legally it is, of course, but we're not Pharisees here, focusing only on legalities. Consider that sometimes divorce is, shall we say, a way of dealing with the hurt of a hangnail by amputating the arm. Every coin has two sides. So the good news, such as it is that the hangnail no longer hurts. The bad news, of course, is much, much larger. Bleeding to death. Yes, to death. As Pastor Peter Cale has observed, none of this is as God intends. God joined together two sinners for their mutual good. And it's through our own sins that we've turned this all around. We finally get the death of that marriage that we desire, but in so many ways we get more death than we bargained for. But everything in Genesis creation accounts points to community, not to aloneness, not to fracturing. In Genesis 1, we read, "And God saw that it was good." 7 times. In that context, the words from today's first lesson, Genesis 2, jump off the page at us. It is not good that man should be alone. God's desire is that we be with each other as a reflection of our being with Him and He with us. The Hebrew words for human and soil share the same root, as God created mankind from the soil. Similarly, the Hebrew words for man and woman share the same root, as God surgically created the woman from the man. Compare God's plan for our well-being in community with our often smaller, fractured focus on people we know who are among the many chosen to divorce, along with all the details, the gossip, ambivalence, guilt. But, as Pastor Cale also notes, for our hardness of heart, God also does a new thing. God comes into the world, bears the death we all have coming, and rises from it. In a world of separation, God incarnate is separated from life itself, divorced from existence. Through the cross, He joins us to Christ. And when God did that new thing, other new things happen. Our separation from God is healed. We are one flesh with Christ. Living as forgiven sinners, we no longer need to harden our hearts to survive. Think of healing, what comes to mind for you? A broken bone, perhaps, in a cast, growing back together? Perhaps a doctor or a nurse or a medic suturing a wound, sewing flesh back together. Flesh, bone, a body that was torn, wounded, broken, coming together. Coming together. We are no longer bound by our sin-burdened short-sightedness. In Christ, we are restored to God's community. We are no longer stuck in the law simply because we don't know what else to do or where else to turn. Released from that entanglement with the law, we are also released from its death. It prompts those weary questions about how much can I get by with and still be right. We are free to live in a different way, not as before, but nurtured by our connectedness with Jesus Christ. This is my body given for you. This is my blood shed